You're listening to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this second episode of Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric Walterkins.
I'm Gavin Schmidt.
And Gavin, what do you got for a story for us today?
Well, I'd like to start out by explaining the parameters of this podcast. I know that we've talked about it, but I don't know that we've talked about it actually on air. This is going to start as far back as Wisconsin crime goes.
Okay.
So if you don't like early history, I'm sorry, it's going to happen. And in fact, it's going to happen today. And it's going to go up to about 50 years ago. So as we're recording this, it'll go up to about 1971. I explained this to Eric off the air. I don't like doing things any more recent than that because there's still family members alive. I mean, 50 years is a long time, but it's not that long. There's plenty of people who are over 50 years old who can remember these things. And, you know, they don't want to hear things about their...
They don't want to dredge up bad memories.
Yeah, they don't want to hear about
like
their
that.
parent, brother, sister, whatever, getting killed. So if you want to hear things that happened in the 80s or 90s or more recently, you're probably not going to hear it here. So I wanted to clear that up right away. I'll take any request you have, but I do have those limitations just out of respect for people.
And just remember that in 30 years on this podcast,
Yes.
we'll be covering those stories. So
Yes, if podcasts still exist, each year we get to move a year ahead, and there's more murders every year, believe it or not.
Yes.
So we will get there. But for today, I thought we're going to get out of the way the very first. We're going to go back to the beginning, get it out of the way.
All right. So what is the beginning?
This year is 1830.
Wow.
We're not usually going to go back this far. This is a little extreme, but just to get rid of the earliest one right off the bat, we're going to get it out of here.
Okay.
All right, Eric, what do you know about Oshkosh?
Not much.
Do you know who the city of Oshkosh is named after?
Well, I would assume the Oshkosh Bagosh guy?
Oh.
Not right at all?
Not right at all.
No, then I have no idea.
Wow. Okay, so this is going to be a big lesson for you then. Okay, so the city of Oshkosh is named after Chief Oshkosh,
Okay.
the chief of the Menominee. And he is our subject today. Oshkosh, before he was the chief, by the time he was age 15, he was placed under the guidance of Chief Toma by his grandfather, who was the head chief. There's chiefs and then there's other...
And just to clarify,
Yes.
Chief Toma is what Toma is named after?
Yes, Toma is named after Chief Toma. Yes. Thank you. Yes, you are correct.
To clarify, Toma is another city in Wisconsin.
Well, they should know that. This is Wisconsin podcast.
Yeah, but you never know.
Yeah.
People in Germany listen quite extensively about the Milwaukee Mafia.
That's
so.
right. That's right. Well, so Oshkosh is raised, in this very nice tradition. And after his grandfather dies, after Toma dies, he becomes the head chief. So Chief Oshkosh is now the head of the Menominee people. As a young man, he fought on the side of the British during the War of 1812. So he actually fought against the Americans in the War of 1812. But he switched sides after that, and he fought with the Americans during the Black Hawk War in 1832, both of which Eric knows nothing about.
No, I don't.
And we're not really going to talk about it because they're kind of beside the point. As interesting as they may be, they're really beside the point of this podcast. What brings us here today is the first criminal murder trial in Wisconsin history.
Okay.
Which is in 1830. So June 3rd, 1830, a young Menominee hunter named Okiwa is out in the woods hunting, doing his thing. He notices movement in the bushes. He takes out his rifle, fires at what he thinks is a deer. This is just outside of what is now Green Bay. Going to the spot to pick up his deer, he finds out this is not a deer at all. He has shot a man right through the head.
Wow. Whoops.
Yeah. So definitely not hunter safety there. Being the good guy that he is, he doesn't run away. He takes the body, he puts it in his canoe, and he brings it to Chief Oshkosh. He's like, I better tell the chief what I did. This was a big mistake. At this time, Chief Oshkosh is hanging out in Green Bay, so pretty close. At this time, the Indian legal tradition was a life for a life.
Okay.
And Okiwa had to know this. So he goes, he brings the body to Oshkosh, he tells Oshkosh his story, and what happened. And he goes, it was a big mistake. I'm sorry. Oshkosh gives no craps whatsoever. Takes out his buck knife, stabs Okiwa right there. Okiwa is dead. It's like, okay, you killed a guy, you're dead. We're good. But we're not good.
Okay.
Because even though that's Indian tradition, guess what? Under Wisconsin law, it's totally not legal to stab a dude. So
now Chief Oshkosh is going to get...
Chief Oshkosh is arrested. Chief Oshkosh becomes the first murder trial in Wisconsin history.
Interesting.
Yes. So they haul him in, and he's like, yeah, I'm the chief. These are what we do. These are the rules, Understandably so. I mean, that's the tradition. I think most of the people actually understood that, were very sympathetic with it, but the law is the law. You can't just go around killing people. He ends up going to court before Judge James Doty. And Doty is a pretty notable figure around here. Do you know where Judge Doty lived?
On Doty Island?
He did live on Doty Island. Okay, you got that one right. And Doty Island, for people who don't know, is between Neenah and Menasha. It's sort of split down the middle. Yes, so that's where the judge lived. This trial takes place, and long story short, what do you think? Do you think he's found guilty, or do you think he is acquitted?
I would think acquitted, but, I mean, they could have also made an example of him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, pick one.
Pick one? Okay. I'm going to say they made an example of him, since he was the first person tried for a murder.
That's a great guess, but it was the other one.
Ah!
So, James Doty decides, and there's a lot of leeway at this time. I mean, at 1830, this is still the wilderness. I mean, there's not decades or 100 years of legal history they're working with here. So they get a lot of flexibility. Judge Doty decides that he cannot punish Chief Oshkosh for this murder. And the reason is because the Menominee people did not have rights, such as voting rights and things like that. And he says, just like the American tradition that says, if you get to vote for your lawmakers, and the lawmakers get to decide the laws and that whole tradition and taxes and everything else. Well, if you don't get to vote for your lawmakers, you shouldn't be subject to the laws. So he ends up setting Oshkosh free. He's like, please don't go around stabbing people. That's not cool. Probably going to get in trouble next time. I can't punish you the same way I'd punish a citizen because you have no rights, which really is a pretty amazing way to approach that, I think. I could definitely see it the other way, where he'd be like, stupid Indian. We'll throw you in prison. But no, he actually was really cool about it and was like, we understand that you've got your traditions and we have limitations. So pretty cool.
So now, are we in an era right now where there isn't a divide where they haven't moved Indians onto reservations or something like that? Because wouldn't it be if this guy was a part of a reservation that he'd be completely, they couldn't even arrest him for it, could they? I don't really know how that works.
Yeah, you're on the right track. And actually, it's a good question because I have a little extra information here.
Yeah. So I just set you up for your next segue,
You sure did.
Awesome.
Yeah, the murder part of the story is pretty short. I mean, he stabs this guy and then he goes to trial and he's let go. But I figured, we're gonna cover Oshkosh. We're gonna talk about Oshkosh because apparently some people don't know who Chief Oshkosh is. So after this is 1830. A couple years later, Oshkosh is present at the signing of the Treaty of the Cedars, and the Treaty of the Cedars took place in Little Chute. It wasn't Little Chute yet, but that's where it was. And the Menominee sold off 4.2 million acres of land under some questionable terms, but they did. And then another 10 years later, they have another treaty, and Oshkosh and the Menominee people sold off even more land in Wisconsin. And this is huge. Like, I mean, obviously 4.2 million acres, like you can't even really fathom that. It's huge. I mean, it's like from Green Bay out to Stevens Point, all the way up to the UP. It's a huge chunk of the state.
And so now I'm curious, did they sell this land by choice, or was this like you're going to do this? And
I think it's somewhere in between. There was an agreement made. There were interpreters there, so it wasn't like they didn't really know what was going on. But I feel like there's some questionable things here. Again, like the 4.2 million acres. You and I know what an acre is, but we can't really picture what 4.2 is. I am fairly confident that Chief Oshkosh has no clue what the word acre means.
So he's just kind of like, 4.2, that doesn't sound like a lot. And then...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know how it went down. But I definitely get the impression that probably there was some miscommunication in there somewhere. And of course, after they sell off this land, well, what happens? The government decides, well, now you don't have land in Wisconsin. Sorry. We got to move you to Minnesota. This is where Chief Oshkosh draws the line. He's like, I will sell you the land, but you cannot send us to Minnesota. That's not cool. I'm a Packers fan. Not cool. And hopefully people know that's a joke. But he then says, I did not understand that in selling this land, that meant I can't even live here. He ends up kind of fighting back against the government, and he does a successful job. He's actually, despite these bad treaties, he turns out to be a very good leader for his people, because he does end up getting 250,000 acres set aside, which is now the Menominee Reservation.
Okay.
Which, granted, that's much less than the land he started with, but it's better than being pushed to Minnesota. He kind of sort of made up for it. How does Oshkosh end his life?
No idea.
Okay. Now, this sounds like a stereotype, but it's actually true. Chief Oshkosh becomes a raging alcoholic. He ends up becoming just horribly addicted to alcohol. He weighs up to 400 pounds because of his drinking. And he ultimately dies on August 29th, 1858. Not exactly from drinking, but he gets in a bar fight and he dies. So it's bad enough he had to go on trial for stabbing a guy. He ends up actually getting killed because he gets in an argument with somebody when he's drunk. Later on, in 1926, the Menominee took Oshkosh's remains, which were on the reservation, and they moved them to Menominee Park in Oshkosh. So if you ever go to Menominee Park in Oshkosh, there's a statue of Chief Oshkosh there, and his remains are allegedly underneath the statue.
I think I have a field trip I have to go on this week.
Okay. Why we say allegedly is that years after the fact, the Menominee began spreading this rumor, and nobody really knows if this is true or not, but they began spreading the rumor. They're like, you think we're going to give you Chief Oshkosh? We gave you some random dead dude.
Really?
You got bones laying in your park, but it's not the chief. So... And Oshkosh, the city of Oshkosh, is well aware of this. So now whenever they talk about it, they say, burial site, in quotes. So, because they no longer know. And somebody could probably excavate and try to figure this out. But as of right now, nobody really knows who's buried in Chief Oshkosh's tomb.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So fun little story there. We got a murder trial, we got a bar fight, and then we got a suspicious grave. So Chief Oshkosh, fun story.
So I am still a little confused on it sounds like bought this land and then they gave the 250,000 acres back to the Indians.
Yes.
But this actual killing would have happened on the reservation, correct?
But there wasn't a reservation yet.
So they had land, but technically the land was still under Wisconsin.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the details of how this works. At this point... So Wisconsin, at this point, is a territory. It's not a state quite yet. So it's like the government claims it as a territory, right? But until it becomes a state, they don't actually have like full ownership of the land. So it's this really weird gray area where the Americans are moving in, they're building cities, they're starting using the American laws, but at no point here are they ever really actually owning any of this land. Yeah, the treaties are kind of like, should have probably happened before they did any of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's, if that's politically incorrect to say. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but the Americans were kind of jerks.
I think everybody realizes that.
I don't think that's a secret.
That the way this country was founded was pretty shady.
Yeah. So to answer your question, when the knifing happened, it was under U.S. jurisdiction, but the U.S. didn't technically own the land, and I don't know how that shakes out. But
at this point in time, they had not dedicated specific spaces to say this is Native American land.
Correct. Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's. I mean, the territory was very it's Wild West. I mean, really, Judge Doty. So he kind of lives in the Neenah area. His court is in Green Bay. He's the judge of the territory. It's not like he's the judge of Green Bay. If they needed to hold court way down in
Janesville or something,
he'd have to get on his horse and go to Janesville. So yeah, this is it's very informal, this whole thing.
That's kind of weird that the judge for the entire territory happened to be in the Fox Valley.
It's actually not that weird.
Explain.
Because pretty much the only place that was built up at the time was Green Bay.
Oh, okay. I could see that then.
Yeah, Green Bay was the original fort before they started taking the land. So
interesting. Well, I think that was another good story. I mean,
I gotta say,
we really took a step back.
Yeah, but I will say, get that out of the way. So 1830, I can guarantee you, we will never go farther back than
1830. All right, then I think we'll wrap that one up. And do you want to throw some contact info out for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. You can email me at milwaukeemafia@gmail.com. The website is either milwaukeemafia.com or else we have now, is it Fox Cities MM? Is that what it is?
Yep, Fox Cities MM.
FoxCitiesMM.com. So that's a new one. There's not even really anything on it yet, but maybe by the time this airs, there will be.
Yeah, it will be the dedicated podcast website for this podcast.
So either website or the email is fine. You can find me there. So if you have a case you'd like to hear about, a murder story that you think doesn't get enough attention, let us know and we'll talk about it.
All right. And as usual, we're going to say, please, if you enjoy this podcast, go to your favorite podcast player and leave us a rating. And with that, we'll wrap this one up. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great one.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.